I am again recording video. I've got my light on because I keep getting told by people that we should be like releasing video version that like YouTube is way more popular than podcasts, so it'd probably do well.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand what the appeal is of seeing like little boxes of people
I
talking.
don't know, man. I think it's not. I mean, honestly, I think it's all in one place. I don't think it's really anything else.
You can listen to our show on YouTube without video on it,
Oh,
you
okay.
know.
They want
But
video, huh?
people have been telling me that, but none of them are our fans, right? They're just people that are like, you should do it as a video, whatever. And uh, unless I hear from our fans asking for that, like, I'm not going to do it.
So here's what I think: we should do a. If we do it, it should be we're all in different filters. One will be a furry, somebody else will be a pirate. Got someone will be a cute girl. Yeah, there you go.
We tried to do that for Lord of the Rings, cosplay it. It just didn't work. Like being dressed as like Aragorn in like a cubicle, office cubicle, it just doesn't work, right? Welcome back to Geek Channel 8, GC8, the podcast for movie geeks and TV geeks and other forms of entertainment geeks. I'm Eric, and with me today is
Well,
Will, and I are on a binge of dinosaur movies right now. And today we're going to talk about the granddaddy of dinosaur films, probably the first dinosaur feature film ever made, The Lost World. And no, I'm not talking about the Jurassic Park film that uses that name. I'm talking about the 1925 silent film, The Lost World, based on the Arthur Conan Doyle novel of the same name. We'll get that to that. We will get to that in a minute. Um, but first, what have you been up to, Will?
well, I been working on fixing things. That's one of my jams. I went and spent a couple days with a friend of mine who's like 18. We worked on a car from 19, excuse me, a truck from 1987. So like I think that's like 37 years old. So, to get it so that you could drive it and have the turn signals work. It turned out to be deceptively simple. We literally used electrical tape and some wire nuts, and it was just yeah. We got it to work. It was really fun.
Yeah, I can't do anything mechanical. Like I ride a Vespa, which is a two-stroke engine, and even that, like mechanically, is like beyond me a lot of the times. Which is probably a good thing because I'm a little bit accident prone. I ended up nearly chopping off the end of my finger while preparing dinner
Oh,
about a week ago. It didn't cut anything off. I did manage to like keep it connected a flap by like wrapping it in gauze and stuff like that. And
Eric, I don't suppose you've been to see any medical help, have you?
oh, I tried. I tried. I after it was still bleeding after a half hour, I like drove to the hospital and they checked me in at 7 p.m. At 11 p.m., I still hadn't been seen by anyone, and I said, "Screw this, I'm leaving," because I had lost blood and I was starving. The whole reason I cut myself to begin with was I was starving at the time I was making the food and I was a little shaky. Now it was like 11 and no one had seen me. I was on my way out of the ER and I run into the triage nurse who checked me in and she's like, you're back. And I'm like, No, I still haven't seen anyone, and I'm leaving. And she's like, well, don't leave without telling anyone. So I got in line to tell them I was leaving, and there was like two people in front of me. Well, it took them like 10 minutes to check in each of those people, so that's 20 more minutes. And then when I got to the desk, she walked away and she said, I'll be back. And she was gone for another 20 minutes, the person at the desk, one person at the desk. So finally, like after she hadn't shown back up 20 minutes later, now 40 minutes from when I had originally planned on leaving, I reached over the counter and grabbed some trauma shears and cut off the little wristband. And then I went and I like gave it to the cop that was standing by the door. And I'm like, tell her this patient left, when she shows back up. So the next day I went and looked on the hospital. You can log in and get like an after visit summary. And I found out that they did call my name at quarter to 1 in the morning. So
Wow.
another hour and a half after I had left, Um,
Oh my
so
God.
yeah, so I tried. Now it's down to just bandages, and I just managed to slightly reopen it this morning, so I bandaged it. But I did put on a Jurassic Park. Uh, there's a raptor bandage on it,
Nice.
so I feel that was appropriate.
My gosh. This is why, a lot of times dudes are just like, I know I am. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Electrical tape and a napkin. That should do.
Yeah, and when I was a freelancer, I used to do that all my self anyway because I couldn't afford to go to anything. So I've gotten very soft in my old age because now I have health insurance, which lulls you into this false belief that people will take care of you. No one is going to take care of you. You still got to take care of yourself. And I went online, and like all my friends who are like us were just like, "You got super glue?" And I'm like, "Damn it! Why didn't I think of that?"
All right, so I'm kind of a wimp. I like the reason why I'm like, no, I'll just bind it really tight with electrical tape is A, that's what was always around, and B, super glue burns, man. That really hurts.
But I
Like,
think wasn't it developed by the army or something for that reason?
yeah, but they didn't care if it hurt because they were just like,
Well, I it hurt anyway. Like I doused it in what the way I did it, the way I say probably saved this thing was I doused it in. I have some 97% alcohol for cleaning my electronics, and I just like poured that on it and then took an entire roll of gauze and wrapped it, to the size of like a softball as tight as I could. And then I did not open it again. So even after that night, even after I got home, I went to bed. I may have taken some aspirin, I don't remember. I went to bed. I resisted the urge to look at it, so
yeah, oh yeah.
and thus expose it to possible infection. And so I kept it wrapped for another day or something. And then when I finally unwrapped it and cleaned it, it was like doing a lot better. So
I mean, should we just go to the next step and you just like, just it's like, oh crap, and then you just turn on the stove and go, cauterize it.
I mean, everything I know how to do, I learned from movies. So it's like once upon a time, like I would have Ramboed this thing. But
Oh my gosh, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
hey, you still got it. Everything's fine. That's the moral of the story.
yeah. Okay.
That's all about fixing things. Yeah, with electrical tape and whatever.
Let's talk about this film that came out in 1925. Do you have a background to the year for us?
Oh, this was a wild ass year to be honest. Okay, so just to put this in context, we're in between the wars, right? We're still leaning hard on the people who lost. But here, let's put it this way: Mussolini declared himself dictator. Mein Kampf came out this year. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
In this year, in where the film was set in Brazil, there is a nationalistic authoritarian regime in place. I mean, honestly, the people who they're crushing there are, I can't even call them leftists. They were just like, we want to be able to vote too. And they're like, no, something like that. That was the first Brazilian Republic. This is something I'm going to drop this year because it is pertinent, and we'll get back to it. But the explorer Percy Harrison Fawcett disappeared into the Brazilian rainforest this year. Put a pin in that because we'll get back to that later. I know you already know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So yeah, it is kind of banana pants, all the stuff that's happening, but this is the background of this year. Let's put it this way: England was still acquiring new properties. That was back then, so they were still like, oh well, after that little dust up, we can still. Oh, what about that thing over there? Yeah, we'll take that island or this or whatever. It was a wild time, but they ultimately, man, it makes for a great movie. I'm not supposed to get there yet. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I'll back off.
So let me give you a background to this production itself. It was directed by Harry O. Hoyt. It was adapted to the screen by Marion Fairfax from Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel of the same title.
Yeah.
And it was produced and distributed by First National Pictures. It stars Wallace Beery as Professor Challenger, and the stop motion animation of the dinosaurs was by Willis O'Brien, who would later go on to do King Kong.
Uh-huh.
Arthur Conan Doyle himself appears in some restored versions in the introduction with the quote, "I have wrought my simple plan if I give 1 hour of joy to the boy who's half a man or the man who's half a boy."
Oh wow.
I kind of screwed up. Normally I do my research and I keep forgetting that these old silent films are largely like large parts of them are lost.
Mm.
And I sent you a link to watch a very abridged version. Apparently there's a much better version out there, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Oh wow.
For some of the live action scenes, they used an open sewer behind the MGM studio in Los Angeles to be used as a river. All right. So just keep that in mind. Arthur Conan Doyle frequently mentioned that Professor Challenger is his favorite character that he created, not Sherlock Holmes, which is his most popular one. And I don't know. I kind of maybe agree with that. I've read some of each. There was some antecedents to Sherlock Holmes,
Yeah.
but Professor Challenger is a little more unique in literature for that time. Anyway, this movie has a 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty rare.
And I mean, yeah.
So in 1922, Arthur Conan Doyle screened it for the Society of American Magicians, which I don't know if he was present, but that society included Harry Houdini, and he astounded audiences with Triceratops family, the
Oh yeah.
Allosaurus and Stegosaurus attack. So the New York Times ran a front page article after that saying that Conan Doyle's monsters of the ancient world or the new world, which he has discovered in the ether, were extraordinarily lifelike. If fakes, they were masterpieces. 1925, on a London to Paris flight by Imperial Airways, The Lost World became the first film to be shown to airline passengers.
Wow.
The first in-flight film. Now, keep in mind that this was the era when it was nitrate film, highly flammable, and the plane was made of wood and fabric. World War I bomber Handley Page 0400. So
and everybody was smoking, and
yeah, so they were really like taking their life in their hands to watch this film. It entered the public domain in 1954, January 1st, after 28 years of being under copyright, plus the final calendar year. Technically, it could have stayed under copyright for 95 years,
yeah.
But at that time, in order to go beyond 28, you had to renew with the US Copyright Office, and nobody did that. So the copyright was not renewed. However, As we'll get into in a minute, a lot of the film has not been found or has since been restored, and so any elements that they find that weren't released in 1925 during the lifetime of the producer have 70 years of protection. And the producer was Earl Hudson, who died in 1959. So if any of those bits remain or come to light, they will still be under copyright until January 1st of 2030. So it may still be several more years before we see this film in closer to its entirety. We'll come back to that again. Willis O'Brien made 49 model dinosaurs,
Wow.
and then they were donated to the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles. And supposedly, after a bunch of years, the rubber began to disintegrate, but they were stored away. But they were inadvertently sealed between the walls of the facility when a new wing was added. So, somewhere in the walls are these models.
That's kind of awesome.
While filming one of the stop motion scenes, I love this because this is like a classic oops. The cameraman spotted a pair of pliers that were left on the table, but so as not to draw attention to them by having them suddenly disappear, he moved them a little bit at a time until they were out of the shot.
That's awesome.
So the original 35 millimeter 10 reel print was destroyed in a fire at Universal Studios. So a
Oh,
lot of these old films, like you said, they're flammable. So this is a problem.
yeah.
This film had a bunch of other setbacks to which impact what's remains of it today. It was a huge success. It made in the millions, and that's not adjusted for inflation, right? So
What?
it made like $1 million or something. It was such a success that they were going to do a remake.
Hmm.
So, in possible preparation for this, Eileen Rothecker, who I don't know who that is, but they reached an agreement with First National to withdraw the film from distribution. And First National was to destroy all the release prints and the foreign negative, but the domestic negative was to be retained. It's not known if the original negatives decomposed or if they were mistakenly disposed of. It also suffered at the hands of distributors who cut the film in half in 1929, presumably to show more in a day or more, you know, thought the runtime was too long or something.
Uh,
So it appeared that all of the excised footage had been lost until archivists discovered an almost complete print in Czechoslovakia. That became the basis for future restorations, but some footage appears to be irretrievably lost. So in 1998, The Lost World was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for film preservation in the United States
mm,
in the National Film Registry. For decades, it could only be seen in an abridged version, that hour-long one. But in 2016, there was a 2K restoration by Lobster Films with the support of the Academy Film Archive, the Archive of Modern Conflict, the Black Hawk Film Collective, the Library of Congress, the Narodny Film Archive, and the UCLA Film and Television Archive. They combined portions of 11 different film elements to preserve the most complete reconstruction of the film believed possible at about 100 minutes. I've seen some of it. It is a really good restoration, and it has that Arthur Conan Doyle part at the start. So if you ever go back and rewatch it again, now you know where to find the good version.
yeah. Oh, there's a good chance I will watch it again.
I've watched it multiple times in my life, and I will probably watch it again. It's one of those silent classics like Metropolis or Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or I just saw The Hunchback of Notre Dame in a church with a pipe organ live accompaniment. So it's one of those films that I will probably watch multiple times more in my life. Nosferatu is another one. And honestly, every time I watch them, it's like watching a whole new film because every time I watch them, 20 years has gone by and more stuff has been found and put back in, you know?
This is silent, but these actors persist on into the talkies. You mentioned Beery in particular. He was so riveting. I had to go look him up. He was a huge star.
Yeah, he's actually in the Seahawk, which when there's a scene when they're in London in this
Yeah.
where you see a movie theater marquee and it has the Seahawk playing, which he stars in, as well as one of the other actors in this film.
Well, just to put it in context, he was an adult actor playing opposite a child star named Mickey Rooney. So
Yeah,
that's one of his, that's where he was at. But yeah, he was huge, and he was a singer before he was an actor, and and apparently he worked for the circus. A man of his time, let's put it that way.
yeah. There was another guy in here who played the hunter guy, I think, who was like a boxer and a wrestler.
Oh wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go!
According to Google, the most popular snack of 1925 was Charleston Chew. So I thought I would have a Charleston Chew. You can still get them. It's still around. So did a little looking up on Wikipedia about Charleston Chew, and it's a candy bar consisting of marshmallow flavored nougat covered in a chocolate flavored coating. It was created in 1922 by the Fox Cross Candy Company, which was founded by an actor, Donnelly Cross, and his friend Charlie Fox, which maybe is one of the reasons you always see Charleston Chews at theaters.
Maybe, yeah.
The candy was, of course, was named after the Charleston, the dance that was popular at the time.
Mhm.
The company was purchased in 1957 by Nathan Sloan, who later sold it to Nabisco in 1980. Sloan's legacy here is that he changed it to chocolate covered vanilla nougat.
Mm.
And in the 70s, he introduced flavors like strawberry, other flavors of Charleston Chew. Warner Lambert purchased Charleston Chew from RJR Nabisco in 1988, and then Tootsie Roll Industries purchased it from Warner Lambert in 1993, and they own it today. Charleston Chew candy bars have been used in college campuses or whatever to demonstrate rheology, which is the branch of physics that deals with the deformation and flow of materials, both solids and liquids, in North American University geology labs.
Wow.
So if you want to show like lava or something like that, Charleston Chew is the go-to, apparently. So a couple of pop culture references here that are of interest to nerds. In 1999, the song Forgot About Dre by Eminem and Dr. Dre, Eminem raps the line, "And I'm still loco enough to choke you to death with the Charleston Chew." It's also mentioned frequently in the adult animated show The Life and Times of Tim. It's also appears a bunch of times in the sci-fi TV animated show Futurama, where the president of Earth, the head of Richard Nixon, frequently talks about it and advertises it. And then there's a podcast, a popular podcast, one of our brethren, Dungeons and Daddies, which is basically a playthrough
Yeah, I think I've
Like
heard
we
of
need another playthrough of middle-aged men like playing
it.
Dungeons and Dragons. But
Hey, I haven't started mine yet, so let's not crowd out the field, right? It's like, oh, there's playroom.
anyway, they supposedly mentioned Charleston Chews a bunch. I think I've heard their podcast. I didn't catch a Charleston Chew reference, but whatever. It's there it is. Okay, so that's my recommendation for preparing for this film. Period appropriate candy, Charleston Chews.
I haven't had one in a long time, but my jaw kind of hurts thinking about it. So it's one of those very robust candies that you take a little bit of chewing. Like they
Yeah.
used to make candies like that, not anymore.
Like saltwater taffy.
Yes.
Like I don't know why they liked that stuff, but yeah.
And now, on with the show.
Let's jump into this. There's a expedition to South America.
Yeah.
Paula White brings back the journal of her father, explorer Maple White, to Professor Challenger in London. And it has sketches of dinosaurs, which is enough proof for Challenger to publicly announce to the Explorers Club or whatever it is, the Adventurers Club, I don't know what they call it, that dinosaurs still walk the earth at a meeting in the zoological hall. And this is met with ridicule. And already we can see that The Lost World, Jurassic Park, is a direct remake of this.
Yes.
Because
Right.
this is remember that?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Challenger accepts a newspaper's offer to finance the mission. He
Yeah.
hates reporters. And like, I read the book and I still remember this from the book. He like originally throws a guy down the stairs when he finds out he's a reporter. Maybe one of the reasons Arthur Conan Doyle liked it so much is it follows the book pretty well. So Professor Challenger, Paula White, this is where the movie's actually pretty progressive for its time. In the book, it's all guys. They actually have a woman go with them. So it's progressive in that way. We'll get to the racist part later, but there is.
Oh, I thought that was just a tiny bit of, hardly any at all, man.
But we'll get to that in a minute. But at least as far as gender equality, it was a lot better than a lot of stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Sir John Roxton, the sort of big game hunter.
Oh, yeah.
The newspaper reporter Edward Malone wants to go on it to impress his fiance. And I remember that was the original driving force in the novel. I think he was the narrator. I thought it was cut out of this film, but then I saw the restored print and it's actually there. She like sort of says, oh, I want to marry like a real man who's faced danger. And, so they put together this team. And then there's another Professor Summerlee.
Summerlee, yes. He is the bug man. Though they don't say that. He's a professor of beetles. That's his specialty.
Yeah, so I think that he's maybe like the Ian Malcolm of this series. It's like just like the writer Michael Crichton was really into chaos theory and math,
right.
And it's like let's throw in a chaos theory math guy. I think Arthur Conan Doyle was like, bugs are cool. Let's send a bug guy with them. But it makes sense because like there are more bugs in the Amazon rainforest than anywhere else on Earth. So yeah.
Well, and the thing is that in it he is the one who's like, I am more than 60 years old, sir, but I think you are a fraud, so I'm going to come with and prove it for myself. There's a lot standing up and declaring why they're going.
Yeah, and then there's like Summerlee's Indian servant Zambo, which is this is someone in blackface. So this is like that's the racist part. To be fair, like it's an actual like he has like one scene or something like that. They could have cut like if any part of this film could have been lost. I wish that was the part that got lost.
But it's pivotal. There's a pivotal scene where he comes through for the whole crew. So I'm just saying,
And then also Professor Challenger brings his butler Austin with them, which is so British. Like it's like, of course, the butler has to go on the mission to the Amazon jungle.
What's he gonna do? Like clean his own shoes? I mean, I don't know what.
I feel like it's like that's so British. It's like, oh, of course we're gonna take the butler with us. We're not savages. All right, so they're at a campsite at the base of the plateau, which, by the way, if you've ever seen the movie Up, they
Yes.
like
Yes.
copy that plateau, right? That's the plateau. It's basically this big plateau, and then there's one like detached part of it.
Oh, absolutely. I was like, wow, yeah, this is, you know what? It's great to see. It's like when you go back far enough back that you're like, wow, is this where this came from? Is this? It's sort of like you're like, it's like, wow, man, Fishbone, they are amazing. I love that band, and then you find out about Parliament Funkadelic, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like that.
Well, that's what we try to do on the show, and normally we would like start with this film and then get the Jurassic Park films,
But we're
but
going
we're
back
going
in
we're
time.
we're going back in time. Yeah, we're on a journey backwards here. They try to scale it, but there's at least an ape man, and that's the guy that is played by the wrestler and the boxer guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
and basically throws boulders and rocks down at them and stuff like that. He also has like a chimpanzee companion, and so
yeah, it's like an ape conspiracy. They're like, yeah,
there's
no,
like a monkey and an ape and a and a chimpanzee. Like all the primates are like, you're not going to get up here. So they instead go up the pinnacle, the spire that is detached, and then they chop down a tree, which apparently is what the guy before them did,
yes, yeah.
and create a bridge across it, which shades of something that'll happen later in King Kong.
You know what they say about what's that about? It's like stealing versus borrowing. The very best people they steal outright. The very best artists, the mediocre ones borrow.
Well, I don't know if this is even stealing because it's the same guy.
Oh
Like,
wow,
you
okay,
know,
fair.
it's kind of like he's playing his greatest hits, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Like man, that was a good riff. Let me do that again.
they managed to get across it, but a brontosaurus like knocks it off, and then they're trapped on the plateau.
Yeah, yeah.
They see a lot of like different prehistoric beasts. They see an allosaurus attacking a trachodon, then it's driven off by a triceratops. We get like, I think this is the origin, or it's one of the origins of the classic battle, because you get the allosaurus versus triceratops monster on monster battle, right?
Right, right. Well, and you might be like, you look at it like, well, that's a funny looking T Rex, but as it turns out, so the Allosaur was, there's never their discoveries are kind of iffy because they'll find the first bones, they don't know what it is, but like I think it was for the Allosaur was first named in like about 1877, right? So that'd been
Yep.
around a while, and it was like this is the big bad dinosaur. T Rex wasn't really named until 1902. So I'm thinking maybe that wasn't even found until 1902, the very first bones. So Allosaur was very dominant in terms of like it is the big bad. That's why we didn't. I guess we didn't get to T Rex until later. So
Well,
yeah,
there is a T-Rex in this, but he's not the big bad. The allosaurus is.
yeah.
So
See, I mean, which I forget. Did they did move on from the T Rex being the big baddest and in the last movie we watched? So
yeah, and also I think they got it accidentally right in this film, because the allosaurus is a hunter, or at least we believe so by more paleontologists, whereas the T-Rex is a scavenger.
yeah.
Remember we were talking about that. And in this, the Agathaumas is attacked by the Allosaurus, but it's the Tyrannosaurus that comes and finishes off the Agathaumas. Anyway,
He knew, man.
there's some other stuff. There's another encounter with the ape man where they
Oh yeah, there's lurking, a lot of lurking of the ape man, and don't forget, there's lots of drama. So I'm going to put up. I'm going to set up the love triangle. I'll keep it brief. But even before they left, the great hunter, he said to the young lady, I know, I guess I'm sure you know why I'm going on this trip. She doesn't answer him, but then when he leaves, we get her like looking around like, oh crap. So this old guy's into me. I don't know how I feel about that. And then later, of course, something develops between the young, strapping young newspaper man and the wide-eyed ingenue. By the way, guys, I'm pretty sure, from what I could tell, that eyes are like the shot that you get from women in this time period. It's like, oh my god, look at her big, beautiful eyes, because that's what they show her doing. Like, oh wait, it's time to show the beautiful woman. Look how big her eyes are. Okay, now moving on. But yeah, it is a whole triangle thing happening, which in a modern film could have gotten really dark and horrible, but it did not.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if she's even the same woman that he was trying to impress by going on this trip.
She is not. She is not the same woman. It comes up. She's like, but what about your fiance? He's like, we are so far beyond the norms of society. And then they do something racy. They kiss. It's
Yeah, well,
crazy.
they thought they were going to be there forever, right? They
Yeah,
thought
I
they were
mean,
never going to make it back to London. And honestly, she's way better than the other woman, right? Like she came on this mission and stuff
right,
like that
exactly.
instead of being like a man who's 6 feet tall, six pack abs, six-figure salary. Like
Oh
I
gosh.
feel like she is the 1920s equivalent of that. Like,
Right.
it's like whereas this other woman is like, yeah, I'm going on the adventure too,
I'm going to go save my dad. That's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of awesome. Oh, okay. So after there's a lot of shenanigans and then lots of dinosaur fights. They do fight off a dinosaur. Okay. Most of the fights are between dinosaurs. They do fight off a dinosaur. They shoot at it, but ultimately it's when the newspaper guy Malone, he picks up a burning brand and he tosses it at the dinosaur, who catches it in his mouth or gets stuck in his mouth, and it looks like he has a giant blunt in his mouth. And he's like, ah, and he goes straight and just runs off like.
Yeah. To make a long story short, they eventually escape again by they have Jocko, which is Paula's pet monkey. She's
Yeah.
at the bottom, like climb up with a rope to the top of the plateau. And they're able to come down that way as like there's a volcano erupting and
Oh yeah, yeah. There's volcanic eruption. Oh, and they find a cave. They find a cave. They go into the cave. It's like, wait, something hominid lived here. Well, of course, we see the ape man, but no, they never encounter them. They find her father's watch, so we know he's dead. He's her bones. This is the hunter. He finds all this stuff.
yeah, and they knows it's him because it's got like a picture inside
Yeah, and his
inside the
initials on the back. And also, there's no other people who would have come here. I mean, probably. Then they find a way out to the other side. It's like it goes to the side of the plateau and goes down, but there's no way down. And that's when they make contact with the servants who are still back at the base camp. And the Indian servant who is in blackface, who they give a very typical step and fetch it thing, but he has the idea of taking the hammocks they brought with them and turning it into a rope to get them down. And he has the idea, we're going to send that monkey up there because he loves Miss Paula.
yeah.
And Miss so hook it, just Miss Paula, have Miss Paula. So it's sort of like, I'm like,
So because it's a silent
mm,
film, you could tone it down by like by rewriting the title cards, but
right.
you can't fix the blackface part,
Well,
like
okay. And this is something where, from we've both been through this, I'm sure. Look, like for example, Heinlein, one of my favorite science fiction authors. Man, that guy wrote some racist stuff. It doesn't, but I don't want you to change that stuff. Let me have it straight and let me discern for myself. And some things, they're just not worth it. There's plenty of authors where it's like, wow, you wrote, there's nothing good here,
yeah.
But I think look, everybody who did this was long dead at this point, and let's just see how it was.
It's hard to extricate stuff from its historical context. For example, a lot of people nowadays consider Amos and Andy to be almost synonymous with racism, right?
Right.
But for a lot of African American folks, it was still like important entertainment, right? It was
Oh
like
yeah.
there are lots of fans. So if you ask like the great granddad generation, they're like, "Oh, we loved that," and it's like, so it's a tricky thing because if you just like get rid of it entirely, like it never existed, then
Uh-huh.
you're like leaving a gap in the historical knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we should do. I think we just bring context to stuff. I mean, look, I watched, I think back, I'm like, yeah, I watched the Dukes of Hazzard. They drove a car named the General Lee, and it had, oh my, there was so much stuff there. I watched that with my parents though, and my dad loved it and watched it. It was in the context, I'm like, okay, it
Yeah.
was a point in time, you know. And
Yeah.
when I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I might feel better about that than the Cosby Show. So, you know,
Yeah. So like
I'm
the
like, oh, I
the
can't watch that show anymore. It just doesn't feel the same. Uh,
yeah. I mean,
they were
my
just good old boys on the show. They were just good old boys. That they weren't never meaning no harm. So it was like you said, it's artifacts of the time, and we should go with. I feel like we should present the context, but then present everything fully. Yeah,
like a lot of Indians consider Gunga Din to be like a racist poem,
uh,
by Rudyard
yeah.
Kipling. My dad loved that poem and would read it to me, when I was a child, like going to bed. He's Indian for those who don't know. So it's it's I mean, it's not simple. It's
No.
there's you know so yeah, I try to contextualize this stuff when we can. Um and yeah, he is the guy that saves them. Like they would have never gotten back with it without him,
Right.
right?
So I mean, I'm like, huh, it's freaking progressive, man. I mean, relatively. So okay, so and here's so we I thought, okay, they're gonna escape, and that's the end. But earlier we see something, we had saw something where one of the dinosaur fights, I think it was the Allosaurus going at this brontosaurus. I'm like, yeah, classic fight. But it's sort of sad because he knocks it over the side of the plateau. And we're like, oh, well, that you don't even get to eat, man. But as it turns out, there it is, stuck in the mud at the bottom of the plateau, right?
So what are we gonna do? The worst idea in the history of bad ideas. We're gonna take it back to London. A live brontosaurus.
Yes, yes, yes. So this is where this theme comes from. I mean, maybe it's happened before, but this is the first time we've seen it so far in our studies here. Is that it's like, oh, this thing is really huge and impossibly dangerous. Let's take it back to the heart of civilization.
Yeah. So this is why I maintain, and people say it's not, but this is why I maintain that the Lost World Jurassic Park is a remake. It is not a entirely different movie
No,
from this.
no.
Anyway, they take it back. Of course, it busts free. My recollection from the novel now, which I read decades ago, that was actually a pterodactyl and not a brontosaurus, but and
Oh,
this is a
interesting.
brontosaurus running amok in London. Eventually, it jumps off of a bridge into the water and swims away, which is actually kind of cool because in the restored version, there's a scene where you see it swimming past the steamship later on, and it looks very much like what would later become the famous like Nessie
Messy.
head,
Yes.
sticking out. So that's kind of what this film is about. I like Professor Challenger as a character. I think he's pretty cool.
Okay, I don't know if we communicate this. Dude is a wild man. He's a professor challenger, right? He's a professor. Well, yeah, this guy's brawling. He like when he first finds out that the newspaper man is a journalist, he comes down off the podium to kick his ass, and then
Yeah.
and then because the guys, so our newspaper manager, Malone, is very persistent. He needs to make this happen, so he actually follows him back to his house and like climbs in and to talk to him, and then he basically they're fighting and rolling down the stairs, and he out the front door, he's kicking his ass the whole way. It's like there's a suggestion that he is the model for Indiana Jones.
That's what I was about to say. He's the a model for an entire line of pulp adventurers who are like scholars, but then also like, men of action. So,
Oh yeah,
this is your Doc Savage, this is your like Professor Randolph Carter, this is your, eventually Indiana Jones types,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. Indiana Jones is a little more refined.
No, really, guys, you gotta see this. It's not a talkie, but he is a presence on screen. Now, a little aside, this guy was a roughneck apparently in real life, and but he did everything. He had an early series of films where he played, I think, like a Swedish maid, and with the joke being that Swedish women were, manly, I guess, but also, so she was like, naive and whatever. But he played it in drag. I mean, he did so much stuff. It was crazy.
One thing you got to understand about this film is that at the time this was written, which is 1912, right? At the time this was written, vast areas of the Amazon jungle were unexplored, right? And this was true when the movie came out a decade and a half later. And this is still true today, almost a century later. There is still unmapped, unexplored parts of the Amazon jungle. So you got to imagine, go back 100 years, what they thought, anything could be in there.
Yeah. So okay. So this is what This was coming back to what we were talking about earlier. What's his name? Fawcett, this explorer who disappeared into the Amazon jungle on the same year that this movie came out. That was the last that they had heard of him. This guy had done this. He had been an explorer for decades. He was not a newbie. This time he went in with his son and his son's friend because he was older. He needed like somebody who was more young and scrapping. Though apparently he was a tough nut anyway. He had great relationships with the different tribes. He would gift them stuff, and even allegedly he even carried a card figurine that he said gave him influence with the tribes. Right, but here's the kicker of all this. This guy grew up with the guy who wrote the book and the movie. They were tight. So a lot of the things in the book were inspired by his reports, including like, so for instance, he was notoriously, he said, like, I think like a 50-foot long snake. And people are like, no, that didn't happen. He's like, no, man, I'm serious. It was like, I mean, I walked it off.
Yeah. So anacondas live in that jungle, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they were like, no, you're just making stuff up to make friends. No, he's like, he reported a boiling river. And for a long time, people were like, that's not a thing. Well, guess what? It is a thing. There is a boiling river in the Amazon. So yeah, he was out there on the bleeding edge of exploration, saying this was happening, and I did experience that, and it was fodder for basically science fiction. It was like, you're making this up, which is lovely. And the whole scheme of the movies we've been watching, there's all this stuff where we're like, you're going into the deep ocean, you're going into this lost world, you're on the bleeding edge of what is possible, and they really were. For them, they were going way past civilization into places where no one had ever seen them before, and the people they met may not have the same language as the tribes around them. It was just, but there was a lot to be gained there, and there's a lot said about, well, the white man coming in and exploiting the Amazon. But a lot of what happened there was the very first European explorers didn't bring any wives with them. They acquired wives when they got there, and they created an entire class of, they have their own names for it, but basically half native, half white. And this is the whole thing between the Portuguese and the Spanish, and there's all this stuff. I got into it. I fell into a rabbit hole. It is entirely as intense and crazy as anything that happened in the Americas and in North America, and what happened in Africa combined. They were explorers, slavers. They would go into the interior to bring back human slaves, and then they got into gold and all that. But they were people who were born on that continent. It was largely them who went into the exploration and everything. They had their mother tongue was usually some mix, but mostly leaning towards the native tongues of their mothers, because they're the ones who raised them for the first part of their life. Totally fascinating history that I have never heard nothing about because I'm an American, and and a usual ignorant one. But that's the context. This is a wild ass country.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Another reason to watch this is that all the tropes originate with this. I mean, the Lost World itself is the term we use for these kind of stories.
Yeah.
I don't care if the Lost World is in the Amazon jungle or in Africa or in Antarctica or like a hollow earth type thing or on another planet or even a time travel thing to the past. A lot of these things have ape men of some variety living alongside dinosaurs. Not historically accurate, but in these things, it happens. Usually dino on dino battles. And this, it was like Styracosaurus versus Allosaurus, but later that's sort of the precursor to the T Rex versus Triceratops classic matchup. Jungle as the terrain, rather than grasslands or rather than deserts or rather than, woodland or rather than any other thing. It's like rainforest type stuff. Volcanoes, no matter where it is, volcanoes, I'll
Yeah.
always figure
Always
into these things.
volcanoes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's another reason to see this because it has all that. And then, frankly, the dinosaur effects are pretty damn good. Now, are they going to compare to, stuff like modern Jurassic Park? No, that's still way more real looking, but it's good enough in my opinion. And it leads into stuff like King Kong,
Oh yeah.
which still wouldn't come out until the 1930s. But honestly, given how well that original King Kong holds up, like it's been remade, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times. None of it is as good as the original King Kong, which that is the effects are still good enough that they hold up a century later almost.
Yeah. I was really impressed. There was a shot of a close up shot of one of the attacking dinosaurs, and it was glistening like saliva on its teeth, and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that gives me fear and and feels. The immersion was there. I felt like they were afraid, even though you just like, okay, they're staged over here in one corner of the screen, and here's a dinosaur. It delivered, and I can't. I mean, if you this is the first time you saw it, what was the quote you said earlier where they talked about how it's like he had imagined these things, but man, they seem real or whatever. He's like, yeah, no, that totally vibes. I love it.
Yep. I give this a thumbs up and think that if you like sci-fi and adventure stuff, you should definitely check it out. It is completely free, so you can find it on YouTube. You can find it. Supposedly, one of the best copies is on archive.org, although they've been under hacker attacks lately, so I don't know if you can access it. But there are no shortage of versions out there. I would look for the longest version you can. Anything that's been restored from the 2016 version. But even if you have to see a abridged version of it, it's still pretty good. So I'm saying like this is definitely a thumbs up movie for me.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I don't have enough thumbs to thumb up. It's too good. And I roared with laughter a lot of times. I had a good time with it. And I think ultimately it is very look, if you're into pop culture and you're into the memes and you're into not even the memes, no, let me take that back. It's these reoccurring themes that you'll see in different movies, etc. You owe it to yourself to see it here. Like I said, it's like going back to music, going further back to where you find like, oh my gosh, this is where this started, or as far back as I can go. And you will find yourself, especially if you're like a gamer or game master, you're like, I can take my personal rift without anybody else's interpret. I'll take it off of there. I can go right back and riff off of this. You'll be inspired. I know 1,000 people have made their own Professor Challengers. I want to make my own. I want to have my version of him because I just want to have that two-fisted adventure of this wild man who is furiously believes in what he believes in, and he will go literally to the ends of the earth to prove it. So
Yeah.
it's good time, man.
Okay. Until next time, this is Eric.
And this is Will.
Signing off.